Hello and welcome to The Sofa, where we sit down with some of the most interesting participants here at the World Water Week to learn more about the array of water-related issues being discussed this week in Stockholm. All Sofa sessions are being live-streamed at vimeo.com/Siwi, but they're also available on demand. My name is Eric Paglia, and on this session, we'll discuss how independent certification using the AWS standard delivers value to organizations operating in the water sector. We'll also explore how independent certifications play a role in translating the standard into real-world situations. And joining me here on the sofa, we have Humphrey Howie, partner and manager at Fat Goose Fruits, representing Renmark for the session. We have Valeria Orozco, director of sustainability at Nestlé Waters. We have Emilio Tenuta, vice president for corporate sustainability at Ecolab. Scott McCready, Director of Outreach and Engagement at the Alliance for Water Stewardship. Hi. And Ray Mindock, Program Manager for Water Certification at SCS Global Services. Welcome you all to the sofa. Very nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Very, very crowded sofa this morning. Ray, perhaps we can start with you. Can you help us understand what is involved with independent certification using the AWS standard?
Yes. The Alliance for Water Stewardship standard is a science-based approach to promote responsible water stewardship. AWS recognizes that water is a shared resource. With that understanding, we evaluate the site, which could be a facility or a group, and look at the water stewardship practices. The certification process includes evaluation of the manufacturing facilities against criteria that's established by AWS. And the AWS criteria includes things such as water quality, water quantity, as much as water balance. It looks at stakeholder engagement, and also we look at governance issues. The certification procedure is actually a science-based process. For SCS services to certify a project, we do a site visit, which includes observing the manufacturing operations at the facility to evaluate their practices associated with water. We evaluate data, we review reports, all against the criteria established by AWS. If the facility the performance assessment indicates that the facility is compliant with the standard, then a certificate is issued for the facility.
Yeah, quite a comprehensive process.
Correct.
And Valeria, perhaps Nestlé Waters has made a commitment to 100% AWS certification for your facilities worldwide. I mean, how is use of the standard providing value both at the local level and from a global perspective?
Sure, absolutely. And local for us is the North American context. That's what I'll talk about when I talk about locally. And in terms of the local value that we've really been able to gain from certification, specifically in our sites in California, 5 sites in California, 1 site in Hope, British Columbia in Canada, and then very recently in Pennsylvania, 2 sites. I'd say it's at 2 levels. One is internally to our operations itself, and one is externally. When I speak of internally, it's very much around codifying and documenting much of the practices that we were already doing in terms of taking care of the water or water stewardship. And it's really about making sure that we're sitting around the table with the people within our organization that have to do this, which are our plant managers, our quality managers, our SHE managers, which are environmental health and safety managers, and we're all on the same page in terms of do we have everything documented that we need to do in order to reach AWS? And I would say kind of the second layer, as I mentioned locally, is externally. So for AWS, you need to define a water catchment, and you need to start to have dialogue and relationships with those inside of your water catchment. And again, we were doing much of this, I would say, in an informal way as needed by the business. But AWS has really helped us codify those relationships and develop what you kind of identify these shared water challenges and develop a plan around them. So that's kind of at the local level, internally and externally. Now globally, what this has done in terms of our commitment, which is a 2025 commitment, 100% of our facilities, is to really scale what I just talked about at the local level and do this in a standardized fashion and codify it globally for all of our sites.
Emilio, as a leader in water management, can you tell us why it's so important for companies to adopt the AWS standard?
Sure. So we at Ecolab are fortunate where we've had 3 facilities that we've had AWS certified, one in Taikang, China, and 2 in California this past year. And to us, the crisis isn't coming when it comes to water risks. It's here. I mean, by 2030, there'll be a 40% gap in supply and demand. And so we need to act now. And so for businesses, like Valeria was saying, we have to begin to start to engage at the local level with stakeholders as we adopt this global framework that really helps businesses really manage risks related to physical risk, not enough quantity and quality, regulatory risk, and reputational risk. So when it comes to stakeholder engagement, it gives us a chance at the local level to really go outside the 4 walls and begin to talk to people where we all have a common goal toward managing a shared resource that communities, government, civic leaders, and others are dependent on to really sustain their operations and to have communities thrive. So to me, the value for businesses is to really engage in that collective action outside the fence line.
And Humphrey, Renmark achieved the first gold certification for an agricultural site. Why was that certification important for the trust?
Oh, thank you, Eric. Just a slight correction. The Renmark Irrigation Trust achieved that status. Renmark is actually the town. I'll just give a quick summary. Renmark is a little town which was the first irrigation settlement set up in Australia about 100 odd years ago. So we have actually we pump water from the River Murray, which is part of the greater Murray-Darling Basin, and we supply water to 600 irrigators, and their main crops are citrus, almonds, stone fruit, vines. So in that context, we are a service provider to all those irrigators. The benefits, there are many benefits. I think firstly, independent recognition for our achievement is really important. I think it gives us access to politicians, government agencies, letting us access that higher level of policy development. Another benefit, I think, is the funding bodies, investors who want to actually invest in the area or within the trust itself have confidence that we will deliver the outcomes that they require. And that sort of rolls on to the actual irrigators and members themselves. It gives them incentive to actually pursue activities which are, whole of landscape rehabilitation. And an example of that, I guess, is we're actually partners with the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, which actually is a federally run body which actually has quite a large amount of water available to them specifically for environmental rehabilitation purposes. And we're actually using their water to pump through our pipelines and deliver that onto the floodplain surrounding Renmark, and actually looking at that whole rehabilitation process. And that's actually leading to actually much greater involvement with the community through education, ecotourism. I mean, the health benefits, the job opportunities, and the whole communities. Even though we're actually just a service provider for water provision, we're actually involving the whole community. And so, so that's some of the main benefits I think we see. I guess the other benefit is the next step is potentially we want to roll that out to all of our members, and so that they can actually gain some of the benefits of potentially market opportunities. And I think landholders, irrigators, their heart is actually in the soil, and they are really an untapped resource. which, given the right incentives, can actually be engaged in a really positive manner for landscape rehabilitation. So,
And as Emilio mentioned, the water crisis is really, it's already arrived, and I guess you're on the front lines in some
Sure,
ways in the Murray-Darling
yeah.
region.
And I suppose that goes to the next step in we being the first, potentially we can provide leadership to some of the other irrigation bodies. Interstate, it's been a very fractious relationship with the various states involved. So I think this is an opportunity to actually kind of come in under the radar and sort of unify some of the irrigation entities in different states and reduce some of that competitiveness. So.
I mean, Scott, we've heard some of the larger actors in the water sector. Perhaps you can tell us what's being done to encourage and support smaller water users to use the standard.
I think the three examples we've got are examples of people who are custodians of sites or they own sites. But there's an equally large, if not larger, constituency who we work with, who are businesses who face water risks through their supply chains. And that's where the kind of smaller comes in. So people that we work with, and the majority of the conversations I'm having this week are with retailers who face risks through their agricultural supply chains, similarly food and beverage companies who see agricultural inputs and agricultural risks, microelectronics companies in terms of kind of manufacturing processing industry, and also textile companies in terms of apparel and dyeing and so on and so forth. So the separation of large and small isn't as clear cut as that. And I circle back on a point that Humphrey made in terms of leadership. Is like one of the things that we look for from the collaboration we have with companies is how we bring people together, how we work through, because these are catchment level problems, so it's about bringing other stakeholders in. But in terms of answering a direct question with regards to how AWS supports it, the important point is that the standard is universally applicable. So it went through a 4-year process to make it sure that it achieved certain goals which were meaningful in every location. However, every sector has its own nuances, its own particularities that kind of we need to address. And I think the role of AWS is to connect people and to bring learning together. So, for example, we have an agriculture working group which kind of looks at large-scale agriculture and small-scale agriculture. Similarly, we do a similar kind of approach with textiles, where we bring different people together to share learning. Looking at developing a similar thing with microelectronics, but also it's a lot of bringing learning from different geographies and different contexts and sharing that. So we have a forum in October in Scotland, and you see a lot of different scales of kind of producers that come at that, and it's a very alive thing. I mean, I think the main thing I would say is that AWS is a conduit for companies and stewards to talk to each other. We're not instructing people in that sense. We're facilitating conversations in a way around a common framework.
Oh, very good. Emilio, the standard promotes stewardship across economic, environmental, and social criteria. Can you share value with stakeholder engagement?
Sure. So Ecolab has a unique view. We serve more than 40 industries around the world, and that gives us kind of a unique perspective. We're behind the scenes, really seeing the issues that our customers are facing related to water. And so one of the things that we acknowledge is that there are challenges when it comes to things like increased costs due to quantity and quality of water and challenges and risks that they face. We see potential disruption depending on the issues that they face where they're located. We see reputational risks. So these are factors that really, I think to Scott's point, enable businesses to really adopt a global framework that hasn't been available up until just 2014, to really start to be more proactive on the way they look at water at a site level, moving away from the reactive. Let's move away from a drought response strategy and move more toward a proactive water strategy that enables us to grow our business and allow communities to thrive where we're operating.
Now, Humphrey, collaboration has been important to achieve certification. How are you able to engage multiple stakeholders in Renmark?
We'd already begun the process a long time before, so I guess we'd had very good relationships with local government, environment departments, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. So I guess our main issue was engaging our member base, and I think with the benefits, we were able to describe those benefits pretty well, and most of our member base they're very progressive people. You know, they really want to get involved. You know, farmers really are. You know, they really do care about their patch of land, and I suppose, and also the immediate environment around them. So it wasn't hard at all, and I suppose when we do go to that next step of trying to roll the standard out to our grower members, I think that's where we'll possibly see some challenges with, the whole documentation process. I think it needs to be simple, and I think identifying the really major issues, based on risk, and I think growers, they don't particularly like bookwork a lot. I'm a grower myself. We like to be doing things outside, and so I guess overcoming that barrier, and already I guess there are a lot of different audit systems that address different things, and some growers actually do feel that they're audited to death to some extent. So we've actually got to outline those benefits really clearly, and make it simple and clarify that. And I think if we can do that, there'll be no problem. Yeah.
I just want to add to that, because I don't think it's just growers that feel that they're audited, or they have a lot of work that they need to do with the various audits and compliance that we need to do. I mean, internally, when I think about when we go to our factories, a factory site, and what it looks like, I mean, their primary purpose is really to produce product, right? And so making sure that we're able to talk to them about what's beneficial for them, on why AWS is important. Obviously, we have a global commitment. Obviously, that kind of has some weight. But when we're asking them to take a full day off away from the line, telling them, like, what we want to do is we want to be able to tell your story about what you're doing in water stewardship in a way that's recognized globally. And that kind of makes them feel proud, and that kind of gets them excited. But it's not just, right, because they have all kinds of food safety audits, all kinds of different audits that we have on site in the manufacturing industry. So it's not only a challenge, I think, for you. I think that's a challenge for everyone who wants to pursue AWS.
Competing priorities
exactly.
are there, and so for the first time, we have now a standard that I think can be implemented with the 6 steps, which is very. I mean, I agree with you. There's a protocol to follow, but I really believe that in the absence of not having that standard, it becomes difficult when people are all adopting different variations of how they manage water. Coming up with one way that really drives, the fact that they can prioritize the actions they need to take in a systematic way, I think is very beneficial.
Yeah. And just to circle back on Humphrey's point, my father-in-law is a farmer, and I would wholeheartedly agree that they do not enjoy paperwork. Had many conversations around this. But the other point about stakeholder engagement, I think the thing that's important to recognise about the AWS is that it's a multi-stakeholder organisation. So it's mainly kind of businesses who are on this platform, but a large part of our constituency is international NGOs, civil society organisations, and they're interested in working with business on the stakeholder engagement, on the catchment level impacts. So the thing about AWS that is key is that the site level actions, but it's driving a pathway to engagement at a catchment level to have catchment level impacts, sort of thing. So it's answering the kind of the goals of sustainability and community and social license to operate that businesses will face from the water challenge that they can't manage internally. Yeah.
We've had a very dry summer here in Sweden, and obviously some of the places we've talked about, California, Australia, are experiencing more and more water scarcity. I mean, how does this meta trend affect some of these barriers, perhaps, to adopting more paperwork-based standards? I mean, are people more appreciating water in a different way that makes them more amenable to taking on more water type evaluations?
I'll let other people speak first, but one of the things that we're conscious of is standard fatigue. So different stakeholder groups have different standards they want to do, and different businesses are like, well, I'm being audited against X, Y, and Z. We're part of ISAIL, so ISAIL is the standard setting body for standard systems. Who would have thought there'd be somebody who sets standards for standards? But we're a family of standard systems, and we are collaborating with other standard systems to have a plug-and-play aspect to kind of standards to cut down on the kind of audit fatigue. So, for example, we're in the middle of a collaboration with Global Gap to match where they fulfill our criteria and where we need to plug our criteria into there to cut down on a lot of the unnecessary paperwork that people would see. Because what you don't want is kind of people put off the system because they've got 7 different auditors asking very similar but slightly different questions, incurring lots and lots of costs.
So what you bring up is a very important point, which is many multinational and national companies are going through the prioritization by creating hotspot where they feel that water is at risk because of things like you mentioned related to climate change, drought conditions, other factors that influence the way their dependency on water is going to be at risk. And so I think that to your point and Valeria's point about operations, they have a really core purpose of driving production and quality. But what we're realizing is that the standard gives them a chance to identify water as a key ingredient that they need to put to work, that needs to be there to support the products and services they deliver to their customers. And if you can do that in a more systematic, controlled, proactive way, you'll avoid the disruptions and the issues related to whether it be operational risks or supply chain risks in the future.
Yeah, drought's a huge risk, and it's happening right now in Australia. Next year we're probably facing the potential water cuts, which is very difficult to take when you've got permanent crops. So I think, and that is when passions run very high, particularly between the states. But I do see the AWS certification as being a stable, unifying system that will potentially reduce some of those passions, and hopefully we'll get through the next drought. So,
Yeah, wish you best of luck with that.
yeah.
Valeria, the Perspectives on America's Water study indicated both consumers and experts believe too much water is used by business. Can you share how the standard is helping promote water conservation?
Sure, and I just want to just give a little bit of a bullet point on what we did with that study. That study was a comprehensive study of consumers and experts, about 25% consumers, 25% experts, 75% consumers, asking them about different topics of water, and it was 6,000 consumers and experts. So it was a significantly statistical study, which is very important to me as a scientist. And there were many kind of insights of the study. One of them was, how can business do better? And do you feel like business is doing well? And it talked about several issues in terms of actually how it uses its water, using an outside standard, perhaps using eco-friendly products. So a few of kind of insights that we gained from that. And it's really helping us to help in our decision making internally on where we should focus and what we should do. So in terms of water conservation, linking it back to AWS, again, as I spoke in terms of AWS helping us internally with our operations and externally. And when we talk about internally, that's where we're talking about how we're using water, where can we gain some efficiencies, where is it possible in terms of where are the hotspots internally, really? Where do we feel that there's perhaps a piece of equipment that needs to be upgraded? That's small, very kind of tactical things like that. But AWS kind of shines a light on that, which is what I love, right? You're sitting and you're talking to folks who've been thinking about these issues. Probably, usually it's the plant manager who has this on his mind for a few weeks, and now we have given him an opportunity in a venue that's globally sanctioned, right? This is something that we have globally to talk about this and maybe gain investment and put this up to the priority list, as Emilio spoke about.
Just to add to that, I think you bring up a really good point. It's not only, we've been focused a lot on outside the fence line, but it does give a really clear framework on how to manage water differently, rethink the way you manage water in the critical water circuits within a facility. And I think smart water management is the end goal to try to drive the dependency on less fresh water coming in so that there's more abundance for the others that need it in the watershed.
I mean, to pick up on both those, and it kind of circles back to the point you asked Ray about the process of certification, because the process of certification is very similar to the process of actually first applying the standard. And that essentially what you do is you walk through the facility from where the water comes in, where the water is used, how much water is used, and where the water goes, and who ultimately receives the water that you've emitted, what the quality of it is, etc. So it's a very systematic approach through a site. So it's a very robust kind of site management framework.
Okay, so we're just about out of time, but just very briefly, is there any particular industries or regions that are underrepresented in the AWS standard that you'd like to see expand to?
Yes.
Briefly.
Mining, oil and gas, extractive sectors. I fully appreciate that they face levels of scrutiny, which the standard has a lot of it forces you to be robust and transparent, and I appreciate that the extractive community face a lot of kind of criticisms on that, and there are kind of standards being developed by kind of the mining community that definitely put you on a pathway towards kind of AWS certification, and I hope that that's the kind of end goal of that. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining us here on The Sofa. Very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to The Sofa. Stay tuned for more episodes throughout the World Water Week.